All right. I had some good answers. We were talking about, what would be the hereafter feel if it was a tangible, concrete thing. You know what I mean? Um, some really good points here. Um, Kareem had said, for one, America is in debt that it can never repay. I mean, that's really unimportant. It wouldn't never repay it anyway, right? That's not real. So Saba said, hereafter is right here after the culture devils are removed off my planet, ridding oneself of bad habits. Well, the first one is not concrete. You know what I'm saying? When you say all the culture devils, that's exactly what I mean by abstract. You know what I mean? So Saba, when you say something like the culture devils are removed off my planet, how are they removed? You know what I mean? Like, for example, right? Doesn't matter where you work, whether you work for yourself or not, though. You're not making money unless you're doing exactly what they tell you to do. And even if you make money on your own terms and everything like that, you're still making for the entire, your work still contributes to the entire GDP. You know what I mean? Right? You're still in the cipher. So that's abstract. You know what I mean? Because how would we get to that place, though? Where culture devils, saying the white man is removed from the planet. How could that happen in a hereafter of righteousness? That doesn't sound like that could happen. So you get to the hereafter of righteousness in an unrighteous way. So that becomes very confusing. Okay, that's peace. That's peace out. Okay. Jarrell, you said if I could add on, there seems to be a constant birth and rebirth that occurs with making knowledge born. I suppose one could go deep into quantum theory with that. I mean, really, we're talking very quantum here because we're talking about the possibility of new worlds, right? Good point. Good point. Good point. So all right. Kareem, you had said, I spoke to a brother a few days ago about this, the hereafter. He was a Muslim from Ghana. You could tell after a while he didn't want to speak to me anymore and consider me a kuffar. Very interesting. Jarrell said, taking the devil off our planet being peace. As positive elevation always corrects errors. You fell in the abstract trap too, because what would that look like technically? What would that be? What would have to happen, actually happen? You know what I mean? What would actually have to be done? Right? So some good thoughts, some good ideas and stuff. You know what I mean? Everybody, you guys aren't really communicating with me. I would say this though, giving a thoughts on the last couple of months is I try to transition this classroom to a, in classroom, but also here. I think one of the problems, students aren't really coming. New students aren't really coming to the school. Most of the students I'm teaching are not coming to the school, but reaching out to me directly. I understand it, right? The school is not pulling in people interested to come as much. I get that. But what I expect of you digitally, I'm also not getting as well. You know what I mean? I get great thoughts and ideas from everyone here. But for those of you that are new students that are trying to get this knowledge, some of you had this knowledge and you love being part of the discussion. Hopefully, what I'm sharing uh, provides more insight or adds something to it, or just sharpens your muscles. You know what I mean? Your mental muscles. But for those new students really trying to get 120 that have been engaging, um, I don't think that I don't think it's I don't think you have worked as hard as you could. Um, to contact me, to write things to me. I would think of maybe one student that has, you know what I mean? But not many, you know what I'm saying? So wherever you're at, make those decisions of what you want to do, you know what I'm saying? Because it'll help you get more out of me. And this damn thing is buffering again. There is the point, 793. Good point. Creating a self sustaining, growing ability to support and maintain oneself and family based on application of knowledge plus wisdom, always producing and holding on to the best part, teaching this. Yes, that is the mission statement. That is an excellent mission statement. And then you said now reverse engineering this in real time so it can walk and talk on its own. That is the point. That is the point. Very good. No, I haven't written. My Spanish is not very good. It certainly isn't hardly good enough to translate anything worthwhile. Um, this is something my brother's like Infinite Mind is taking on, you know, to really translate math, alphabet, and all that. You know, if you guys get in contact with Infinite Mind, he definitely has all that. You know. Right, right. And you know, it doesn't. I don't mean any disrespect by saying the yapping, but how could we apply this to the children? You know what I mean? Right? Because what happens is that they grow up and then we feel like we made concessions, but what really happens is that they end up growing up and really being part of a world that hasn't changed enough. And that there's no way around that. Right? I have a daughter that's going to be 20 years old at the end of August. And the truth is that this world hasn't changed enough, you know? And every single generation has to grow up and it's never enough. In fact, there are special deteriorations that come along with all of the supposed elevations or possibility of elevation. You know, so it's it's definitely a Max Romeo situation. You know, one step forward, two step backward in a Babylon. Right. Right. In this, we have to be prepared. Hmm. 7/9 of every good project, not only to put together, but to teach a lot, live and take from knowledge to born in all things which could be passed down to all those things interested in bringing to life. Yeah, certainly is. You know what I mean? And I think it's important that our children, as they grow up, if you're going to teach the degrees, you got to teach them this way, because they'll come to a point where they have to make decisions about their life. You know what I mean? And will their decisions be functional, and which is necessary, but also be able to apply something that adds on. You know. I think this, right? What type of world do we want to see, right? How do we transition from what is the type of economy that you want to see? You know, is it possible to this that we have to make decisions of what type of economies that we want, what would be acceptable, right? Get out of the fantasy of constriction as well. Constriction itself is a fantasy. For example, thinking that it's only capitalism that has to exist such a way. When I hear people go, "Oh, socialism, they don't do any work. You don't have to do any work." That tells me that you didn't do any research at all about what these countries that are socialist really go through. And you might as well be as old as me, because you sound like you were indoctrinated in the 80s with Cold War ideologies. So we have the economies that we have to decide. You know what I mean? Right? The lessons that we accept and the reasons that we accept things. You know what I mean? What would be acceptable? You know? I was getting into debates even on Twitter, talking about it a lot with my siblings, right? For example, right? The ideas of, we talk about the Simone Biles situation, right? And this is a perfect example of what sports is supposed to be useful for. It's supposed to be useful so you could see how decisions for a game or for a sport can be mirrored into real life, where the abstract playing a game, a competition of just sports becomes something where you actually analyze it, right? And you apply it. So when you have your children, you look at things like the Olympics, there's some suspension here, right? Let's take away the fact that when Simone Biles is competing, just like anyone else, for America, they're competing representing a corrupt country. Obviously, it's an oppressive country. So that contradiction, maybe even that hypocrisy is there, but let's get that out of the way, right? It's this idea, right? Look at the lessons here for the children. It's this idea that it's acceptable to not continue on, not because you're injured, but for the possibility of injury, right? That's what was said also, right? That she had the twisties or whatever, which I don't really buy, because if she did, that means that she's not the first to ever get that. So in all the history of Olympic sport, that's never been an injury that people have bowed out for. The where you didn't get hurt, but now you have a case of the twisties, whatever they call that. See, that's when you know things are made up, because we've been watching these things for years and years. This thing has been going on. That's never been a reason for people to bow out. So that's irrelevant, right? But this idea that we could succeed enough in something that now our next endeavor in that same field, we are allowed to quit at any time. And see, that's what I don't bear witness to. You know what I'm saying? Because the more that you succeed at something, now the reason that you're doing it, it isn't because of the accolades. It is because of your own reality. In this case, the word that you gave. You know what I'm saying? The word that you gave out that you would be with this team. The fact that you were chosen over others. So now there's a spot that someone really wanted that now you have, right? Would quitting in this fashion be something that would be allowable? You know what I mean? If it was something that was physical, like they're trying to say now, like an injury, then the coaches would have said that, and it wouldn't have been the mental health thing. Here's why I think they say it's a mental. They're switching up, saying it was dangerous for her to continue. The reason they're switching that is, especially now, because the sister that won, and also original woman, Sunez Allah, her background story has hells that probably are more intense and more difficult, and absolutely more recent, right? Losing an aunt and an uncle to COVID supposedly last year, right? So she lost them last year to COVID. Her father was paralyzed just the year before in an accident. So these are things that the sister that won, Sunez Allah, had to deal with as a 16-year-old. First with her father, then at 17 years old, losing her aunt and uncle, right? And continuing on to a level where she was not only able to compete for the gold, but win the gold. Whereas the heralded athlete said, listen, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to compete anymore. And all we had was a respectable showing that had some flaws, not up to her standard, right? And I think this is the way you answer things is always our perspective of understanding. I have taught this many times, perspective of understanding. Our perspective of understanding is to the children, right? When we watch sports, we are analyzing the actions and choices that these individuals make. We don't say, well, I could never play that sport, so I can't judge that sport. That's a cop-out. That's a real cop-out. You know what I'm saying? Because as the other sister showed, she showed improved despite massive hells that she was dealing with. So the hells are equalized, right? What lesson do we give our children? Is there a level of excellence that can be reached that allows you to forfeit? That's what it is, forfeit. Not leave, forfeit. This is not retiring. This isn't ending a career. This is forfeiting in the middle of something, not due to injury, because no one pulled her out and said you were too injured to continue. No one did that. So if it was serious, they would have done that. They didn't do that. They're giving that reason later, and that never happens in any of these major sports, right? Especially today, if you watch baseball, basketball, if you see the analytics and the intense analytics that they have based on injury science, how they take people out after a certain amount of pitches, they don't care if you're doing good, how they rest people and they give automatic rest, analytics to try to prevent sports injuries is at a peak now. So that other thing doesn't matter. It's all irrelevant, right? So these are the lessons. Well, what do we get? When we think of a hereafter, it reminds me of this situation. What are the ways that we expect our youth to be? What are the ways that we expect in detail? What would we do in those situations? So we use the current realities that happen around us and we say, well, based on the information we have, what would we do? Based on the information given us, right? It's important. I see some comments here that have veered off. Born Farid, you're saying you wrote math in Spanish. You live in a socialist country, Venezuela. That's right. That's right. All right. Who did you make those mathematics with? Have you been building with? Who have you been building with? Okay, because just because you make the mathematics don't mean that it is. If you're not building with somebody that has knowledge 120, then whatever you decide to translate is pretty much irrelevant. You know what I mean? It's not how well you know the Spanish. It's how well you know the degrees, right? That you were translating. You say we face government repression, don't have freedom of speech, neither good education. Absolutely. Absolutely. I certainly not denying that, Fareed, right? You say I'm privileged to know English and getting into the knowledge of self. All right. Well, let me know who's teaching you, okay? Because, right? Inflation is killing us here. All right. I would say this, right? The system of economy that needs to be chosen, I think, is one that is certainly not capitalistic, but I certainly don't agree with a socialist society as a larger system. What I'm saying is this: I actually disagree with major systems. I think the world has been impaired by large countries and thus large economies. I think that all economies and it ends up shifting to everything else, to agriculture, education. Everything should be local, with a connection to larger reality, but everything should be local, and that's how I see the hereafter. I think there is some type of socialist reality that can exist in a righteous sense in a smaller society, literally a smaller population. I don't think any economy is going to work though in a large society. People talk capitalism here, there, but we don't control capitalism. And just like in the socialist countries, it is controlled here as well. Okay, in a capitalist society, we have the perception that we could definitely do something for ourselves, but that is very relative, and that is very in a larger populace, though, not really happening. 793rd, you said a certain amount of security with self, balance of performance when handling media and playing optimally at higher levels on the big stage impacted Naomi Osaka's time as well. Right. You know what I mean? I think this. What's not being understood is that if people are ill prepared to deal with the hells, and we have seen so many of our athletes, black, brown, suffer because they're not mentally prepared. Okay. One of the ways to bring light to it, though, isn't necessarily to quit. And what's happening is that quitting is becoming a suitable answer. That's not a suitable solution because you didn't really solve anything. You know what I mean? You just negated the problem. And that's taking away from the fact that coaches um, and people that work with the athletes have to be original people that understand and can deal with them and can guide them through. And that you need mentors in athletics. You know what I mean? Just like a lot of old ball players say that, like Barkley will say that a lot, and others will say when they first started, they had these guys to mentor them and everything like that. This is what they need. You know what I mean? What they don't need, though, is the opportunity to say that what really solves the situation is to just quit. Right? If we say that they had to quit, that's all relative. That's very relative, right? Even with the bowel situation, it's very relative. However, it is not a real solution, though. It is a gross and infected band-aid that has just happened. You know what I mean? Because what happens is that the only person that gets hurt more is the person that's quitting. You know what I mean? And I really feel that in all sports, it's about pressure situations, and no sporting event has more pressure than the Olympics. So that was expected already. So that means that she wasn't properly invested in. And as a grown woman, now 24, we could say, oh, that she's young and stuff like that. People are attributing that because she's petite, but she's a grown woman. And this is something that they needed to prepare for. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm teaching my children. They have to prepare for this. They can't just quit in certain situations. They need to seek that guidance, whether it's from me or the other elders that are around them. And absolutely, because I'm here, my daughters can seek that guidance. But and they do, but this stuff right here of accepting people just quitting like that, it reminds me of that old, you know, military mess hall saying, take what you want, eat what you take. You took the opportunity to go in there over somebody else. You got to finish that. Shit, and if it was wartime, it's like you represent your country. From the American flag to the universal flag. And put them in a competition. Right? If this was the flag, would that be okay? Man, we would say they were too weak for that. It's unacceptable. Right? Especially in this case because they had achieved excellence. So we have to look at how we judge things. You know what I'm saying? And we just take it as a F you to America that she could just bail on them. And it's not really the point. Right? I doubt that there's any moment during that she said, I'm not an American. I doubt it. That's our vantage point as being with the knowledge of self and being a little bit more militant to the realities. You know what I mean? Now, why I haven't seen any mandates, Kareem. When I travel, I bus, train, or ferry boat. I wear my mask, but that's been consistent. No one really stopped wearing the mask, at least in the MTA. Walking out on the streets, going into public buildings, haven't really stopped doing that. Just basically taking it off when we're outside or something like that. So, the mandates, it's no mandate because it hasn't really switched too much. 793. Might we be imposing our standards of greatness, consistency, and a champion mindset on a youth who have already reached their ceilings, from LeBron and Naomi to Simone and others who are ready to go that extra as we know it, yet haven't been discovered, like the second ball kid? I think no, God. Let me tell you why. That's a good question. I think this, right? Naomi, I think that's a case of bad coaching, though. In general, I think this is all bad coaches. They don't have coaches. Coaches are for your mental mind state because they're all young. Simone's not, we have to get this out of our head. Simone is not a baby. Okay, she's 24. It's not a baby. Okay, it's nowhere near a baby. Okay, that's an adult decision that she made, though. She's been able to drink for years. You know what I mean? So the problem is that look at the criticism I gave now. I didn't say she had to go in there and win. I didn't say she had to go there and get the gold, silver, or bronze. I said you gave your word to a team. You know what I mean? And definitely the team had younger people that had gone through horrible things worthy of dropping out, like the winner of the gold medal. Right? So the problem is that people is not keeping their word. The level of excellence that Simone already reached, though, the truth is, no matter what, all she had to do was compete. All she had to do was go out there and compete. You know what I mean? And if she really was injured, then declare that she's injured. But you can't say that you might get injured, though, and that's a good reason after you said that the real reason you're leaving is for your mental health. Because to me, none of those reasons are good. None of them. You know? I think it's very awkward after winning everything and making it all the way there, quitting literally when the event, as we see, is already over. All they had to do was do their best and see what happens. If they couldn't do all the moves that they innovated, then do some of them. Do none of them. Get by. Do something as respectable as you can. But they said it was their mental health, though. So that shows me that after all this, they're choking and they're using their excellence, though. They're using the resume of their excellence, though, to get out of stuff. And that's unacceptable, man. You know what I mean? We don't accept that from anyone else, though. Do we accept it out of those that have really achieved things? To say, you know what, I'm going to bail out of this one. Midstream, not at the end of it, you know, not before the teams are set. Right there, the day of. Mm-hmm. Is that how now, Jarrell, look, you said, I can see where the inconsistency lies in her decision. She used mental health as an excuse. What it seems is that as though her heart wasn't in it anymore. Very well may be true. But you see how that's unacceptable? Because what's the lesson in life? First off, she's 24 years old. That was her job. You're looking at it like an event. That doesn't matter because she's already done it all. But that wasn't an event. That was her job. She's 24 years old. She's a grown woman. That's her job. And she just said, I don't feel like doing it anymore. And you know, the truth is that it was almost over. It's almost over. Right? If you really want to understand anything, you have to be willing to lose. You know what I mean? And what lesson, not just youth watching, but what lesson can she take with that? Can she apply that into regular to life? You know what I'm saying? Can she apply that in her life? when she gets out, she goes back to America and she starts to work wherever she works, right? I guess, right? Does she get to have a life like that where, I think I did enough. I think I'm just gonna quit here. Is this applicable in life now? It's not. So that means that as a sports lesson for our children, it's not valid. It's one where what happened in sports actually cannot be applied as an insight to life. You see? And that's what makes it wrong. You see the new Space Jam. Huh. Yeah, that Space Jam was terrible. It was a waste of my life. 2 hours of one of the most boring movies I've ever seen in my life. And as just like LeBron's career, though, Bugs took the shot. You know what I mean? Bugs won the game. You know what I mean? But 7 and 3, maybe that's all they can mentally, psychologically, physically muster when the top stage pressure is on. Absolutely. And the thing is that if we call it a choke and say that we are us teaching our children and ourselves, taking note ourselves of how we live our lives, that we have to say, listen, we have to make sure that when we get to the levels we're at, whatever we're doing, that we don't get to a position where we can't do that. So it's still a negative lesson, because if we say, look, okay, I understand she couldn't do it and she bowed out, whatever. But understand that that's not acceptable. So that means that the way we apply that reality as a lesson for ourselves is one of a negative lesson, no matter what. Because we don't go, oh, I got to fix mental health. It's more important. No. That you're late in the game if that's happening. You're late in life if you have to fix after that happens, right? So that's what I mean, there's no way around it. There's no way around it, and I can hardly believe that I was made blind, deaf, and dumb, that there aren't enough coaches and people around her that actually are dealing with her and everything, and that she couldn't fish out